guys, it's Dasha. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be a wrap up of all the books I read in the month of September. Before we get started, really quick, I just want to give a huge heartfelt thank you to everyone who has ever watched my videos, commented, or subscribed. I hit 1,000 subs, which is like a crazy number to fathom, and I don't know what to do with myself. I started this channel a year and a little bit ago to have something to do during quarantine, talk about the books that I read, because there's no one in my life that reads. So to know that there's so many people that actually enjoy my opinions and talking about books with me is like mind-boggling. So thank you so very much. I know a lot of people do like Q&A type things when they hit a big subscriber milestone, or like live streams and stuff, so let me know if there's anything along those lines you guys want to do or see from me, and I will absolutely do it, because I would love to, I don't know, do something crazy to celebrate. But yeah, I just wanted to say super quick thank you. I did hit it, I think, last Friday, but that video was pre-recorded, so I didn't get a chance to actually like thank all of you. So thank you, and let's get into my September reads. As usual, I'm gonna go in the order from my least favorite to my favorite, so we will be starting with a DNF this month. So I DNF'd one book this month, and that was The Good Daughter by Karen Slaughter. So this is an adult thriller about two sisters who one night are forced into the woods at gunpoint. One of them runs away, the other is left behind, and then years down the road you're following one of them as there's a new tragedy in their hometown, and she's kind of caught up with it, and it's bringing back all of these memories from that terrible night. And this was not bad by any means. I got about 200 pages in, and this is like a 500-page book, so I got like a solid chunk of the way through. I was listening to this on audiobook, which was really great for me, because when I do things like I bake, I cook, or I clean, sometimes even driving, it's just nice to have something to listen to. So I was kind of listening to it while doing that. It wasn't like I guess it wasn't like a specific thing I was just dying to read. I just wanted a new thriller, and I wanted to get this one off my shelves, and I was excited for it. I've heard great things about Karen Slaughter. The thing that I liked about this was how like raw it was, not only in terms of the gore and the brutality, but also in terms of the emotions, the complex kind of relationships between people, and how they're not always perfect, and I kind of really enjoyed seeing that. However, what I didn't like was this over focus on the gore and the violence, especially towards women. This is a complaint I've heard leveled against Karen Slaughter in the past, absolutely, and normally that kind of thing doesn't bother me, but in this case it was a very specific instance of two scenes that felt a bit too much, and I'm not going to give a ton away. All I'm going to say is that because there are two sisters in this initial setup, you get the perspective of both of them. So you start the book with one of their perspectives, and then at that mark that I was at, like the 180, 200 page mark, for some reason you get the other sister's perspective, but it's not like what happened that was different. It is the exact same scene that is very brutal, extremely gory and violent and uncomfortable from the other sister's perspective, and it just felt entirely unnecessary. It felt like it was really just taking it way too far for the sake of shock value, and I didn't enjoy that in the slightest. Personally, I thought that it was just wasting so much page time, and it made me stop caring about this book. That's the part that I stopped at. I didn't get any further because I quite frankly stopped caring about it at that point. I thought that that whole repetition just kind of drove home something that maybe I was missing, or I didn't care about enough, but it felt overdone, a little exaggerated and overly violent for, again, the shock value, and it's just not something I really cared to continue. I don't think this book is bad by any means. I do think it's quite interesting, and there's a lot of interesting discussions in the book. I just think that it's not quite for me. I didn't really enjoy this forced repetition of a particularly traumatic and violent incident, and it just wasn't like enjoyable to read at all. It made me not care about the kind of more thrillery mystery aspect that was going on, which kind of sucks, but it was just not for me. I think I would try Karen Slaughter's other works, but if they get to the point of gratuitous violence like this one did, she's probably not the author for me. I don't know. I'm gonna try Pretty Girls. I think that's the other one people absolutely love. That's like very fucked up, and like I don't have an issue with gore. It just didn't work in here for some reason, probably because it got so repetitive and unnecessary. All right, so the next book I want to talk about is Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna McGuire. So this is the second book in the Wayward Children series. This is a series of fantasy novellas that are all loosely interconnected. It's about kids who take portals into other worlds, and then when they come back into our world, whether it be days or years later, they're kind of fucked up. Nobody really believes them that they went somewhere else, and so they're all just trying to cope with that. And in this book specifically, you follow two twins that you were introduced to in the first book at Eleanor West's home for wayward children, which is where a lot of these kids end up because this place really helps them heal from that, and they kind of go through therapy together because Eleanor West believes them. She knows that these things happen. And so there's a bunch of kids there that have lived through that, and there's a pair of twins that you meet in the first book. So this was their story. This was when they went into that other world, and this world is inhabited by werewolves and vampires and all sorts of magical creatures, and it's a very odd book. What I did like about this was all these kind of interesting discussions about how parental choices can affect children, childhood trauma, and gender identity, and all these things of like how your choices and how your situation in your childhood can really affect you later on. I thought that those themes were really interesting. However, there's a lot about it that I didn't really love. I thought that in terms of getting backstory, because I think that's what this was supposed to be, I felt like there wasn't enough backstory for the characters in their new world. It was more their backstory when they were still in our world, and there was their parents that were giving them some childhood trauma. So then you got a lot of that point of view, but then when they got to the actual world, the book was kind of dragging at that point for me already because it was set so much in our world. I also felt that there could have been more, I don't know, it felt like because these books are so short, they're all about like 150 pages or something, it feels like you don't get that proper character development to see how they got from point A to point B. I felt that actually the character development in the first book was a lot better, even though there was a larger cast of characters. I felt that despite following only the twins in this book and like a few side characters, they really didn't feel that developed. It felt like the switch in their personalities once they arrived in their alternate world called the Moors, I think. Once they arrived there, it's like their personalities just switched out of nowhere. And while there was some explanations that were attempted as to why they had such a sudden change in personality, it just didn't really work for me. It felt kind of very dramatic and too sudden to be relatable and believable, I guess. And not that a fantasy has to be relatable, but relatable in the sense that you feel like these are real people, real characters with real motivations. So I felt like on that front, it kind of sucked for that. I think the series is interesting in all the different themes that it tackles. Shauna Maguire always does a great job of putting a ton of different kind of representation in there, and all of her characters are like really interesting. They're just not always the best developed, but they have a lot of potential, which always kind of sucks. They're great books for readathons because they're super, super short and they are pretty engaging. You do get sucked into them. I just thought that, especially compared to the first one in this series, this one was just kind of a letdown. So I ended up rating it 3 stars because I was like intrigued, and there were some things that I did like I said, a lot of the thematic content, but a lot of it also did not sit quite right with me. So the next book I want to talk about is Emma in the Night by Wendy Walker. This is an adult thriller / mystery. It is about 2 girls who go missing for 3 years, and one day one of them comes back all of a sudden, and it's this crazy hunt to find her sister. And did I say 2 girls? It's 2 sisters that go missing. And you're basically following this family trying to piece together what happened, because the sister that came back clearly knows all these different things, but she's not quite letting on just how much she knows and what she knows. And that's what I really liked about it, honestly. The choice for the narrative for this was really, really intriguing, because you are getting very few details, not enough to be able to guess what happened necessarily. You're just very interested and hooked without it being kind of like boring to go through the steps of discovering it, if that makes sense. Like, the process is as much fun as the resolution was to find out. I also really enjoyed the characters in this. I think if you like Gillian Flynn, you will absolutely love this. There's these fucked up female characters that are just so fascinating to read about, and they're so well fleshed out that I think it worked perfectly. Most of the characters in this are female, and it worked really, really well, in my opinion. I read this really, really quickly, and it's just like a very compelling read. I don't think there's many things that I don't like about it necessarily. I just think it wasn't like the most show-stopping book ever. It didn't like blow me away, but it was really entertaining, and it was a pretty good time. And like I said, the characters were really good. So besides not having like a ton of opinions on it, I would still recommend it. I think it's a great quick read. And like I said, once again, if you enjoy Gillian Flynn's thrillers and mysteries, especially like Sharp Objects, I think this would really work for you. The next book I want to talk about hurts my soul a little bit. It's So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. So if you've seen my 5-star prediction video, it'll be linked if you haven't, but this book was on it because I felt like this was going to be so up my alley. This is an exploration of people who have been mass shamed on the internet or through media, people who have had their scandals exposed or just blown up out of proportion. Jon Ronson talks to them and kind of explores this idea of mass public shaming. So I thought this was going to be perfect. The back even says required reading for the internet age. And what I did like about it was that he did talk to a lot of these people and got their perspective, but also some people that even did the shaming and kind of got their view on it as well. And I think overall that's really the interesting thing about this, was this exploration of the issue from all perspectives rather than just saying shaming is bad, do not shame. However, and I don't know if this is necessarily a fault of the book or the time that we're in. This book was published early 2015. If you're on the internet at all, you would know that early 2015 was when the internet started changing at an even faster pace. The first of the BLM protests happened during that summer of 2015, if I'm not mistaken. There was also Gamergate, there was Trump's presidency, there was all of these other mass shamings. Cancellations have become even more wildly popular than they ever have been. We've seen creators and celebrities have to leave the internet because of mass shaming on a scale that the world has kind of never seen. Yes, there's a few examples in this book, like that woman who tweeted that she was like going to Africa, but she can't get AIDS because she's white. And then like Twitter was like in a huge tussle about that because she was like sleeping on the plane. So they were like, oh, when will she wake up? We're gonna flambe her ass, basically. And like, yeah, it's interesting to see those examples. But since then, we have had so many more culturally relevant examples of the spread of social media and the utility that it has in exposing things, that this book felt almost out of touch. And again, I don't think that's necessarily the fault of the book, but it's really, really hard to ignore, in my opinion. And I'm not saying like, I mentioned BLM earlier, and like obviously I'm not saying that's like a case of public shaming, but it is a very powerful tool in the hands of the oppressed. Social media helps us really take the power away from the oppressors and use our voices and amplify them into maybe shaming for a good purpose. Most people on the internet know the names of many cops who have killed innocent Black men because of this powerful shaming tool. So I feel like those kind of conversations would have been so interesting to have. And the other problem is there is even a preface in this book, because this paperback edition was obviously released later, but it still does not quite comment on a lot of things that would have even happened in that 1 year. So while I really like the potential and the exploration of this idea in theory, in this book, it didn't quite work for me. I don't know if that's fair of me to say, because like, I guess it's not really the book's fault, it's the fact that I'm reading it in 2021. But the other thing too is like, because the author is fairly well known, he does insert himself a lot into this, and it kind of came off as a little annoying. Personally, I thought it was like trying too hard, but like it wasn't like a big thing. I think really the thing was it felt out of touch, it felt out of date, and it just didn't quite impact me the way I thought it would. There were some interesting ideas, but they weren't taken far enough. It was kind of a little all over the place because of this narrative choice that the author took to insert himself a lot. I'm kind of disappointed. It was a 3-star read. I would recommend it, but I think you should be aware if you go into it that it was published now 6 years ago. How much has shit changed in 6 years? Like, it's absolutely insane, and like, unfortunately, this book is now essentially obsolete because the internet moves too fast. So while it's good in theory, if you're not a piece of shit and you don't fucking bully people into committing suicide on the internet, you probably won't need to read this for the moral message anyway. So I don't know. This one leaves me with a lot of conflicted feelings. The disappointment is real. The disconnect is real, but it was also somewhat interesting. I did tab some parts that did stick out to me. So it's a weird one. It's like a toss-up. I'm still not sold on it, but I don't hate it. Yeah, that one ended up being a 3-star because I'm very conflicted about that one. All right, wow, every book from here on out is a 4-star, so that's great. I guess I had a pretty good reading month despite DNF and a couple of 3-stars. So what do we got? So I'm gonna talk about Bad Blood by John Carreyrou next. So this is a nonfiction account of the fraud that was Theranos. Theranos was a startup in Silicon Valley based on this idea that the founder, Elizabeth Holmes, had, that you could get hundreds of lab quality results from just a single drop of blood or a few pricks of blood rather than having to take like a full blood test. She envisioned it at some point being in everyone's homes in America, and you would be able to have your health like connected to your phone and be able to monitor your diet and if you have any like, chronic health issues and all this kind of stuff, monitor from your house. Basically, she had this grand idea to change science forever and medicine and biochemistry, and she decided to get a bunch of scientists and engineers to work on it. She got a bunch of investors, people were like sold, and then recently it was found that it was all a big freaking fraud. She really was screwing everyone over at every turn. It's a fascinating story. There's a bunch of documentaries on YouTube about it, I'm sure. I think I've seen a couple in my like suggested feed, because right now the trial is happening, I think, or it's like still ongoing. And anyways, fascinating story. I quite enjoyed this book. I really liked the narrative structure of it. It was very like readable. It made sense logically. It was in pretty chronological order, and you got a lot of different perspectives, which was really interesting to see. And you got to see a lot of behind the scenes things because the author had interviewed a lot of people that used to work there. I also just absolutely loved the writing style. I think it worked very perfectly for this, because I'm gonna be real with you, like if you saw this story on a TV show, people would complain that it's unrealistic because of how wild it is. The shit that was going on at the Theranos headquarters is just like unbelievable. I can't believe that it went on so long. And like I said, if this was in a TV show, people would give it low ratings because it seems too unrealistic. Like this couldn't happen, but it did. So I really like that the narrative style was quite simple and pared back, so you could really just sit there and be like, you're not lying, this is real. There's not much I didn't like about it, to be honest. It wasn't like the greatest thing I ever read. It was a 4-star read. It was pretty good. I really enjoyed it. I do think this is a fantastic pick for you if you do enjoy true crime, but you want it to be a bit maybe less gory or exploitative. If that's something you're concerned about, I think this one is just a really fascinating story. I really enjoyed this. I thought that you could tell that the author was a journalist, again, because that writing style comes off as just very clean, very simple, and just lets the story and the absurdity of it shine through. I think it worked perfectly. I love that we got the little afterword with a little update about like the court case and all this kind of stuff. I thought it was just a really, really well done book, really strong, and I would absolutely recommend it. Like I said, if you love true crime or those kind of really interesting gripping stories, this could really, really be for you. Or even if you just want something that's a really good, I don't want to call it like a primer because it is very in-depth, but if you do want to find out about this Theranos and this whole like defrauding, I think it's a really, really good place to go. I can't decide which one of these 4 stars I like more. It's a really good reads. I don't know what to say. I'm gonna go in with Ray Bear next. So Ray Bear by Jordan Fueko. This is a young adult fantasy, and this is about a girl who is raised by her mother and by her father to be a weapon. She's basically supposed to infiltrate the royalty and kill the prince once she gets close to him, but of course prophecies never quite go as planned. This was a magical spellbinding book. Honestly, I'm not one, I'm sure you know if you've been on my channel a little bit, I'm not one who loves very fairy tale type stories. I find a lot of the time there's a real lack of character depth and consequences, but the fairy tale tone in this worked so incredibly beautifully. Every scene was so rich, every character emotion was so intense, and oh my god, what a spectacular book. Honestly, I was spellbound. I really enjoyed all the different settings. I loved all of our characters and their relationships. I love how it felt quite playful and a bit more young adult despite having a lot of very heavy themes, topics, and scenes and moments. I thought that it was just absolutely beautifully written. Like the actual writing and the prose was just absolutely spectacular. Like I was just so hooked for the whole thing. I'd given this a 4-star because there was a few things with like pacing I didn't love. There's a few tropes that kind of came in. There was like a semi-amnesia trope that kind of kicked in that I didn't like love, and just a few twists and turns that the story took that kind of had me like, oh okay, like took me out of the story a little bit. But overall this was so spellbinding and just breathtaking that like I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. It's just a really unique story that I genuinely enjoyed. I thought that this premise of having to kill one that you get close to, that you're supposed to love, It was gonna end up being kind of cringy and not done properly, but like the way it all played out made so much sense. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was beautifully written and there was no cringe to it, which was great. Like it was just so well thought out. This world is also really interesting. I hope we get to see more of it. There's all these little bits and pieces that are just included from time to time that make it feel so rich and vivid. And I want to spend more time in every single like sub province of this world that we're in because it's so fascinating. And anyways, I really enjoyed it. I really want to read Redemptors soon, which is the sequel. I think it's only going to be a duology anyways, so that's good because I'm absolutely stunned at like how breathtaking it was. Not that I didn't expect it to be good. So if you saw my September TBR, Ray had picked this book for me as a punishment. She had to pick a book for me that she loved, and this was one that she's been screaming about for ages, and I'm just so glad that I loved it too. And it's getting a Netflix adaptation, which is just perfect because this book was so cinematic. I could see a lot of these scenes, the way they were described, like the vibes were there and I felt it. So I can't wait to see it on screen, honestly. The more I think about it, the more I'm thinking this might be like a 4.5 to 5-star read because it's so good. So the next book I want to talk about is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. So this is the first book in an adult fantasy trilogy. You are following Nari, who is from Cairo, and she one day accidentally summons a jinn warrior who takes her to the magical city of Daevabad, which is the ancient stronghold of the jinn. And there's all sorts of political intrigue between the jinn, and it's magical, and ooh, this was good. This was good. I absolutely love the world. That is the main thing that stuck out to me in this, honestly, was the world. Because listen, a lot of fantasy worlds you don't really want to live in. They're cool to read about, you love characters and like the politics, but a lot of these worlds are brutal and just like not too much fun. I want to live in this world. I want to visit Daevabad. This shit sounds so cool. I absolutely loved it. I felt that everything that we were given wasn't to the point of just like showing off with all the world building you've done. It felt very believable, all these things that were being mentioned very casually. Like it just helped weave such a rich view of this world, even though we didn't get to see a lot of it outside of Daevabad, essentially. I also thought that most of our characters were pretty good. I really did like Nari and Dara. I did not like Ali that much, even though like a whole perspective was his. I didn't like him as a character, but I appreciated his perspective for like the insight that it gave us inside the city of Daevabad, because for a large part of the book, Nari was actually traveling to Daevabad. So at least perspective inside of it was important. I just didn't like him as a character. Something about him just really grates on me. I'm hoping he has like a really good character arc because I'm sure there's potential there, but really our other POVs are just far superior. I also love just how fast paced this was. I don't want to say it reads like a YA, but you know that kind of very compulsive, like almost like candy type reading when you read YA. It's like, oh my god, I can read this like all day, and next thing you know, you're staying up till like 4 a.m. to finish a book. That's what I got from this. The writing style is very simple in that like you don't really need to, it's not this like complex world building and magic and soliloquies and all this stuff. It's beautiful writing, but it's not so complex that you're slogging through, you know, an hour of reading and you only get through like 4 pages. It's really compulsively readable. It's great for reading slumps. I think if you're ever stuck in one, this is fantastic. Also, maybe if you're not used to adult fantasy, this is a great introduction because of that writing style. I think, to be fair, this writing was almost a hindrance in this book because I personally felt like it could have been even more opulent and like beautiful and grandiose to go with the richness of this world. And I also felt that the writing was kind of detrimental to the kind of intensity of the plot and like the intrigue. I felt like there was parts that moved too fast and that didn't get enough time, whereas other things that should have not gotten that time got too much of it, and it just felt a little rough in terms of that. For example, the romance I loved personally. Something about it had me like screaming, but then sometimes it just kind of jumped and then jumped back and jumped in weird spots, and it just wasn't fully properly developed. And same with a lot of other plot points. It felt like we got a lot of time focused on certain scenes, and then it'd be like, well, then all of a sudden this happened, and it's just like, okay, like I was hoping to actually see it happen. So that's the reason I didn't give this book a full 5-star, but like in terms of the feels it gave me, this was fantastic. If you've seen my October TBR, if you haven't, go watch it, it's a good time. But I will be reading Kingdom of Copper in October with Ray because we read the first one together and we had such a good time, and we both are really enjoying this, and I can't wait to continue this series. Honestly, it's a great time. Okay, we're down to 2 books, one of which I will mention extremely quickly. So this I started back in August. This is Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb, the second book in the Farseer trilogy. High adult fantasy. I talked about it in my August wrap-up because I had started and I got a chunk of the way through, but I actually finished it at the beginning of September. This was phenomenal. 5 stars. I'm obsessed. Whereas the first book didn't quite grip me right away. I didn't end up giving it a full 5 stars because I wasn't really acquainted with the characters yet and I wasn't like completely enamored. This book just grabbed me by the heart and has not let go. It is a series that I cannot wait to continue. I'm like itching to continue it. I want to buy everything that Robin Hobb has ever published and read it all because I am just absolutely head over heels. But I feel like I've gushed about this book a lot, so I'm not going to do it any longer. But like, god damn, if you haven't read Robin Hobb yet, just please. But beware, because your heart will be broken. My favorite book of the month is, I think, one that like I expected I would like. It was on my 5-star prediction, but like, whew, I loved it. Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. So this is the first book in a new adult epic fantasy series set in this mythical South America with like pre-Columbian mythology. It is mesmerizing. It is spectacular. I was screaming half the time. There's just so much going on. If you would like the bare bones, you are following several point of views. You're following a priestess in this very famous, you know, religious city. You are following a siren slash pirateer who is tasked with bringing a very precious cargo to this magical city. And you are also following a little bit of flashbacks from a boy who, when he was young, his mother aimed to turn him into a vessel for a god. First of all, someone being turned into a vessel for a god, if that does not intrigue you, like if you're a fantasy reader and that does not intrigue you, I don't know, like what's wrong with you? But also, all the other very rich point of views are just so freaking cool. They just add to this. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. I loved everything about this. I can't say a single bad thing about this. The writing is breathtaking. The characters are fantastically, achingly beautiful and raw, and so I feel for them. There's actually one character I didn't like, but like that's not the fault of the writing. I think it's just in terms of personality I didn't like her. But like, oh my god. And then there's a romance, and when it started happening I was like, oh hell no, like this does not make sense. The things I felt. Page 399. Listen, if you know, I'm not going to read this out loud, but if you know the scene with the honey and then in the baths, I lost my damn mind. I lost my damn mind officially. This was so good. There was all of this crazy religious but also political intrigue. There was all of this family dramas. There's all these crazy little threads being started that you just know the next book is going to expand upon. And I'm just so good. It's all sweaty from my fingers. If you haven't read this yet, please do. This is just absolutely immaculate. It is breathtaking. I can't get enough of this. I want to reread it immediately, which never happens. I'm just like head over heels. This is also a gift from Robin, so thank you, boo. You know me and you got me this incredible book that I will now be screaming about and shoving into everyone's face. So if they have any complaints, they can take it to you, because like I'm contender for one of the best books of the year. So fucking good. That was all the books I read in September. Let me know if you've read any of these or if you will be picking some up on my recommendation, because if you are, may I suggest these two. Listen, I made a channel to scream about books into the void, and scream into the void about books I shall. My social media is linked down below if you guys want to come talk to me there. I would love to talk to you guys. I also have some more playlists and videos linked down there if you want to binge watch, you know, my Game of Tomes, my TBR game playlist is down below in case you're interested. And other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!